Hello everyone, this is Jumbo Commander and today is a deck tech on Jenara, Asura of War. This is a slightly budget deck, so you're going to be able to build this and sleeve it for under $100. And a lucky subscriber will win a copy of this Jenara deck. I'm super excited. Let's dive right into Jenara, Asura of War. Bant! Green, white, blue for a 3/3 flying angel that has an ability. 1 and a white, put a +1/+1 counter on Jenara, Asura of War. Jenara is an excellent +1/+1 counter general, but she plays in a little bit of a different way than many other +1/+1 generals, because Jenara goes kind of big herself. She's a huge threat when it comes to commander damage, being able to constantly add +1/+1 counters and have evasion. And that's actually going to be a theme of this deck, going big with +1/+1 counters. So it's not just Jenara that can go big. Ashai, Ojutai Dragon Speaker, Sunscorch Regent, both of these creatures can go really big with +1/+1 counters. I find that these creatures are often ignored until they're too big to really handle. Also, it's nice because these two have a little bit of evasion, just like Jenara. There are a few others that can go big really fast. Managorger Hydra, Forgotten Ancient, and Gideon's Avenger. Managorger Hydra has the great ability, Trample. Forgotten Ancient can spread those counters around. Maybe give your Jenara the ability to one-shot someone, or spread those counters around to some other useful creatures. And Gideon's Avenger gets bigger based on your opponent's tapped creatures. This can be really useful if your meta is running a lot of mana dorks or maybe token strategies. There are going to be a lot of cards in this deck tech that add +1/+1 counters to creatures, but there are a few that work particularly well with these big creatures. Vorel of the Hulklade will double the counters on these creatures. So if you have a particularly powerful Forgotten Ancient, you can just pay blue and a green, tap and double it. Opal Palace can make your commander even bigger, getting +1/+1 counters on the cheap. Now, the reason why I've chosen this strategy is because it's fun to play with +1/+1 counters. Atraxa's popularity right now is proof that everyone loves to proliferate and play with +1/+1 counters, but Atraxa is super duper expensive. Just the precon is out of control. And a lot of the cards that deal with +1/+1 counters have skyrocketed in price. Doubling Season is a great card. Just a fantastic card, and even in this deck could be great. $57. That's unreasonable. You can build this entire deck for under $57. And you know what? It doesn't even impact Jenara that much. Take Hardened Scales at $3. Hardened Scales does the same thing to Jenara. Instead of 1 +1/+1 counter, it puts on 2. Just like Doubling Season. Now, Doubling Season is a much better card. It has tons of other abilities. But in this deck, it could easily be replaced by Hardened Scales. Now, there is one card that goes a little bit beyond the budget that could fit great in this deck, and that's Deep Glow Skate. Coming in at $7, this fish can double the counters that you've invested on these big creatures, making Jenara doubly as powerful. This deck has come in at a great price point and has a lot of room to grow and improve. It's very flexible in terms of its strategies and its budget. Smashing with +1/+1 counters. Sporeback Troll can regenerate creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, and Plaxcaster Frogling can give them Shroud. These activated abilities can protect these big critical creatures in your deck. Another set of cards that will protect your creatures are special board wipes. Tragic Arrogance and Cataclysmic Gearhulk can wipe the board of everything but your key big creature. Giving you some selective board wipes are very powerful. When it comes to powerful board wipes, I've been impressed by Ixodron. It is so powerful and particularly good with +1/+1 counters because as the creatures flip over and lose all of their abilities, they keep their counters on them, maintaining their relevance As long as we're in the category of sort of controlling the board with +1/+1 counters, I gotta throw in Bane of Progress. It's an all-star, it's amazing, and there aren't very many artifacts and enchantments in this deck. That would just be collateral damage to the Bane of Progress. Let's get some damage through with Tuskguard Captain and Crowned Ceratok. Abzan Falconer, Sapphire Drake also give your +1/+1 countered creatures flying, but when it comes to Sapphire Drake, Archetype of Imagination is just better, so I'm not messing around with the Drake. But I am very interested in other abilities to get damage through. How about Champion of Lampholt, a favorite of mine, and Elite Scale Guard, a budget card that does work in this deck, allowing your creatures free attacks against your opponents. This deck is all about attacking, so the Odrix are going to be great, but Odric Lunarch Marshal is even better because of all these great keywords, giving all of your creatures lifelink or first strike. In fact, Abzan Battle Priest, Enoch Bondkin, Archetype of Courage, and even Archetype of Endurance can provide these great keywords across your entire team, some of them even having +1/+1 counter synergies. I've also included a few pieces of key removal. Citadel Siege can just keep putting +1/+1 counters on creatures, or lock down an important creature on each of your opponent's boards. Selesnya Charm can exile a creature with power 5 or greater, which are the kinds of creatures you want to exile. Or give a creature +2/+true and the critical word trample. That can let your commander or any of those other big creatures through. And Collective Effort can be a very flexible card. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, destroy target enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on your whole team. I gotta mention some +1/+1 utility. First up, Mana Ramp with Fertilid, Rishkar Pima Renegade, and Gyre Sage. All of these do something a little bit different when it comes to ramping with +1/+1 counters, and they all do a great job. But one thing we want to do is get to the higher levels of mana. Jenara is very mana intensive, having you pump more and more mana into her to have bigger and bigger impact. So let's go with big mana ramp, Realm Seekers. 4 green, Realm Seekers enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the total number of cards in all players' hands. At my commander table, this is a huge creature. It's just gigantic, a problem unto itself. But then when you pay 2 and a green, you can search your library for a land card, any land card, and put it in your hand. So this gets land drops after land drops after land drops, and is a huge creature himself. Verdant Confluence, a little bit expensive at, I think, above $2. But this card does kind of what you want in this deck. It's super flexible. 6 mana, but you choose 3, okay? Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Yeah, you sometimes want +1/+1 counters on certain creatures. That could be great. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. A regrowth effect is exactly what you want. There's tons of permanents in this deck. Or search your library for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. We do want to keep ramping after 6 to get to even bigger and bigger plays. So Verdant Confluence does kind of a little bit of everything we want and is very, very flexible. So I've found a way to include it in this deck. Another form of mana ramp that's very popular among counter decks is Everflowing Chalice and Astral Cornucopia. If you just pay a little bit of mana into these great artifacts, you can proliferate them bigger and bigger. Now these are fantastic in decks that have a lot of proliferate. This deck has a little bit, so they're just really good. We've covered mana ramp. Let's talk a little bit about card draw. Fathom Mage has Evolve, and whenever Fathom Mage gets a +1/+1 counter placed on her, you get to draw a card. So all of these abilities that place +1/+1 counters, boom, card draw. I love it. Armorcraft Judge. You're going to have lots of creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, and when Armorcraft Judge enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card for every one of them. Prime Speaker Zagana is a classic, and it works particularly well with our commander and those other big creatures we have, letting us draw huge amounts of cards and having some +1/+1 counter synergy herself. As long as we have big creatures on the battlefield, Rishkar's expertise will also let us draw cards equal to the highest creature's power. And a favorite, Inspiring Call, works really well because we can draw a card for each creature that has a +1/+1 counter on it, but more importantly, those creatures gain indestructible, protecting our creatures that we've valuably invested a lot of time getting huge. We talked a little bit about this deck's ability to go big, but we also need to go wide because +1/+1 counters are great at spreading out and making a team huge. Creature decks can be very susceptible to board wipes. That's why I like to have a little insurance policy in the form of Chasm Skulker, Hallowed Spirit Keeper, Hangerback Walker, and Hooded Hydra. All of these creatures can get pretty big on their own, but then spew out a ton of creatures when they die. It makes it so that your opponents don't want to wipe the board. They're really, really great cards to have in a deck like this. Zamek Guildmage can give you an idea about how powerful going wide can be. Zamek Guildmage reads green-blue for a 2/2 elf wizard, and for a green and a blue, no tap, this turn each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. This ability stacks. So let's say you're about to put a bunch of tokens onto the battlefield. Maybe your Chasm Skulker is going to die. Well, you can just keep pumping green, blue, green, blue, green, blue, and suddenly those squids are going to be huge threats on their own. Or let's say Zamek Guildmage is out and you need some more fuel. You can pay a green and a blue to remove a +1/+1 counter and draw a card. So with your commander, this is 1 green, blue, white to draw a card. Now that sounds pretty bad, but there's going to be a lot of +1/+1 counters flying around your side of the battlefield. So taking a few off to draw some cards is going to be really valuable. Not to mention with Chasm Skulker, same card I mentioned before, you can pay green and a blue to remove a +1/+1 counter, drawing a card, putting a +1/+1 counter back on Chasm Skulker. Oh, the synergy. Now I made some room in the budget for one of the best go wide +1/+1 counter cards available, and that's Avenger of Zendikar. This is an army in a can, it just wins games. I don't have to convince you about how good this card is. And with all the +1/+1 counter synergies we have, Avenger is gonna end a game or two. With all these creatures entering the battlefield, let's pump them up with Juniper Order Ranger and Cathar's Crusade. These cards get out of control really quickly. And there's a few other cards that can pump up your team. How about Novoisin, Heart of Progress, Primeval Protector, Ridgescale Tusker, Cultivator of Blades. All of these can take a relatively puny token army and turn it into something truly ferocious. I like how all of these work together as well, and there are other cards that can definitely fit into this category. I like the idea of having a deck where you have a few creatures go really big, and then if they address that issue, you can, boom, go wide, and then build up your army that way too. As long as we're putting +1/+1 counters on our creatures, let's proliferate them with Tezzeret's Gambit and other proliferate cards, or Malfist Revolutionary, which is kind of a cool new proliferate. This is a very powerful deck that kind of skirts a few different strategies. Jenara herself can be a great Voltron-type commander, getting herself huge and threatening your opponents with her evasion. You can also get other creatures really big and powerful and find ways to protect them and wipe the board around your one big threat. Or you can sort of regroup and go wide with a token strategy. Build those tokens up with +1/+1 counters and take advantage of all of the synergies that +1/+1 counters bring to the table. I hope you all enjoyed this Jenara Asura of War deck tech. My name is Jumbo Commander and I make Commander videos. They come out every Wednesday. Thank you very much for watching. I want to remind you that one lucky subscriber is going to win this Jenara deck. If you have not entered the contest and want to win this deck too, go ahead and click on the video here to go back in time 1 week and find out what you need to do to win this awesome deck. I'll tell you one other thing you can do. If you follow me on Twitter, I will be giving away a Zadahedron Grinder Commander deck. 2 Commander decks being given away in the next week. You should sign up now so you can win this deck. And if you want to leave a comment, I'd love to talk to you, or send me a tweet on Twitter. I've been doing the Twitter. Or if you have something longer, feel free to email me at jumbocommander@gmail.com. I want to thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday to give away several Commander decks.